All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive that is, well,
A little different.
yeah, a little different. It's a little more personal. It's based on a blog post from kiemmeng.org, and the title is Notes on Gardening, Part 479, Another Round of Coleus Propagation.
I love it.
Yeah.
A very specific deep dive today.
Very specific. And so what we're going to be doing in this deep dive is really trying to extract some insights from one gardener's experience. We want to look at Coleus propagation.
Uh-huh.
We want to look at some of the challenges that he's faced trying to grow this plant. And we want to see if we can extract some wisdom from his experience, some things that maybe he's learned about Coleus, but also about gardening in general.
Yeah.
And maybe draw some comparisons to some other plants. So sounds good.
This is going to be fun.
All right, let's jump in. So, right off the bat, the author, Eng, mentions that Coleus is a tender perennial. Now, for anybody out there who doesn't know what that means, can you just give us a quick definition of that?
Yeah, tender perennial basically means that in a tropical climate, this plant can live for more than 2 years.
Okay.
However, it cannot handle frost. So in many climates, it's treated as an annual, meaning you need to plant it every year
Got it.
because it just won't survive the winter.
Okay, that makes sense. So he mentions kind of right off the bat that he's had some trouble with his Coleus.
Yeah.
And he even says that one of the contributing factors is his lack of experience.
Yeah.
But then he talks about how the different microclimates around his house have also posed some challenges for him in trying to grow the Coleus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, we think about our gardens, and especially, if you have a yard in your home, we think about that as a single climate. But what Eng is pointing out here is that there are actually lots of little microclimates. One area of your yard might get more sun
Right.
or more wind or be more protected. And so what he's finding is that even moving a coleus plant a few feet can drastically affect how well it grows.
Yeah, that's a good point. So even in a relatively small space like a yard, you can have these little pockets where the conditions are different. So you have to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that all gardeners learn over time. You might read in a gardening book, oh, this plant needs full sun. But then you plant it in your yard in a spot that you think is full sun, and it doesn't do well.
Right. Yeah.
And it's because there are all these other little factors at play that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, it's all about observation. You have to pay attention.
Exactly.
So he does find a little bit of success, though, placing the Coleus in areas that receive bright, indirect sunlight or partial shade.
Yeah.
And he even mentions that his neighbor, who grows different varieties of Coleus, has observed the same thing. So it seems like maybe this is a common thread among different Coleus cultivars. They might have slightly different needs, but this is one thing that seems to be pretty universal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Coleus come in such a wide variety of colors and patterns and leaf shapes.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get caught up in those differences and think that they must have very different needs. But what Eng and his neighbor are showing is that there are some fundamental things that all Coleus need, and bright indirect light is one of them.
So things are going pretty well, but then life happens.
Yeah.
He had to do some painting on his house. He moved the Coleus, and he said he inadvertently neglected them. I think a lot of us can relate to that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I've definitely been there. Life gets busy, and sometimes our plants are the first things to suffer.
Yeah, I know. I've been guilty of that myself. So as a result of this, the plants started showing signs of stress. He mentioned that their color faded, they dropped some leaves, and he even included a photo in the blog post. So it seems like the intense sunlight was maybe scorching the leaves, and there was potential nutrient deficiency as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it seems like even though Coleus like bright light, they don't like intense, direct sunlight. It's kind of a Goldilocks situation. Too much sun, and they'll burn. Too little sun, and they won't thrive.
Too little sun, and they're not going to get that vibrant color that they're known for.
Exactly. And the nutrient deficiency is also important to note. Just like us, plants need a balanced diet to stay healthy. And if they're not getting the nutrients they need, they'll start to show signs of stress, just like Eng's Coleus did.
So to deal with these plants that are not doing so well, he decided to take some cuttings and propagate them.
Smart move.
Yeah. And he specifically mentions that he used vermiculite as the rooting medium. Can you talk a little bit about vermiculite and why that might be a good choice for this?
Yeah, so vermiculite is a mineral that's really good at retaining moisture, but it's also really light and airy, so it allows for good air circulation around the roots.
Okay.
And that's really important for cuttings because they're delicate. You don't want them to rot.
Right.
So vermiculite kind of provides the perfect balance of moisture and air circulation to encourage those cuttings to root.
Makes sense. So he also mentions that he likes to share his surplus plants with other people to encourage them to get into gardening. But he's decided not to share Coleus with beginners.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he gives a couple of reasons for this. The first one is that he says Coleus is a challenging plant to maintain, which we've already kind of talked about. But then he says something really important, and that is that Coleus is not safe for pets or children.
Ooh, that is good to know.
Yeah. So, sometimes we get so caught up in the beauty of plants that we forget that they can also be dangerous.
Right.
And this is especially important for beginners who might not be aware of the potential toxicity of certain plants.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about the plants themselves. It's also about the products that we use on them.
Right, yeah.
Fertilizers, pesticides, those sorts of things.
All those things.
They can also be harmful if they're not used properly.
Yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. So he does offer some alternatives for beginners. He recommends basil and sissoo spinach, also known as Brazilian spinach. Have you grown either of those?
I have grown basil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's very forgiving.
Yeah, I've heard that. I haven't personally grown it myself, but I've heard it's a good one for beginners.
Yeah, it's a good one to start with for sure.
Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about the blog itself, keonmeng.org. He describes himself as musings of an old software plumber. Night-long tinkering with Free Libre and open source software, FLOS, and occasionally some other stuffs, C projects he dabbles in. So it seems like he's got a pretty diverse range of interests.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's always interesting to me to see how people's different interests intersect.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this guy's really intellectually curious. He's not just interested in one thing. He's got his hands in a lot of different pots.
Yeah, he's got notes on gardening, but he's also got photography, fish keeping, dieting, home improvement. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, it's like a little window into his mind.
Exactly. And you can tell that this notes on gardening is something that he's been doing for a while because this particular post is part 479.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's clearly been at this for a while.
Clearly a passion project.
Definitely. And he also includes some disclaimers on the blog, just saying that this is his personal experience, this is his opinion. He's not claiming to be an expert. He's just sharing what he's learned.
I like that.
Yeah, it's very humble.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that everyone's experience with gardening is going to be different.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah. And we see that in his experience with the Coleus. He's had some successes, but he's also had some setbacks.
Exactly.
And he's learning from both.
Yeah. And that's what gardening is all about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a constant process of learning and experimenting and adapting.
Yeah. So he also has a section on his blog called Projects. He lists all these different projects that he's working on. And then he also has a list of frequent topics, which, again, just shows how diverse his interests are. And then finally, the blog post is dated March 17th, 2025.
Okay. So a relatively recent post.
Yeah, a relatively recent post. So what do you think? What are some of the key takeaways from Ang's experience with Coleus?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that even plants that are considered perennials in some climates can still be quite tricky to grow.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have the right conditions. And I think Ang's experience with the microclimates around his house really illustrates that point.
Definitely. And I think another takeaway is that propagation is a really valuable tool for gardeners.
Absolutely. It's a great way to multiply your plants, and it can also be a lifesaver if you have a plant that's struggling.
Yeah. And then finally, I think Ang's decision not to share Coleus with beginners is a really good reminder that we need to be mindful of the potential toxicity of certain plants.
Yeah, that's so important, especially if you have pets or children.
Absolutely. So any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I think this deep dive has really highlighted the importance of observation and experimentation in gardening.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to fail, because even when you fail, you're still learning.
That's right. And I think it's also a good reminder that we can find inspiration and knowledge in unexpected places.
Yeah. Who would have thought that a software engineer would have so much to teach us about gardening?
Exactly. So get out there, explore your interests, and never stop learning. And on that note, thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
See ya.
See ya.